What's going on, guys? K-Pine here and welcome back. And in this video I'll be featuring Swampert in the Ultra League Premier Cup. Ever since the slight nerf to Earthquake a few seasons ago, Swampert has kind of fallen out of the pecking order a bit in both the Great League and Ultra League. And well, with the Ultra League Premier Cup here, I took a look at the meta and let me tell you, it was Swampert's time to shine. Tentacruel, electric types like Ampharos and Lantern, Dragalge, Empoleon, Alolan Sandslash, Clefable, Talonflame, the list goes on. And what's even better, there are a little amount of grass types being used, and some of Swampert's hardest checks are those legendaries that are banned, like Giratina, Guzzlord, and Virizion. Considering it wasn't seeing much use, it had to be too good to be true, right? But let me tell you, it wasn't. Dare I say Swampert is even the best sweeper in this format currently. There are so many teams that disrespect Swampert and are even core broken by it. With that said, I managed to go on a 50 and 25 run with the team over a span of 3 days, with a 20 and 5 run on day 2, where I'll be showcasing 2 4-1 sets I had with the team on that day. The 50 and 25 run was enough to bring me well onto the leaderboards, even bringing my elo up into the 2900s. The team consists of Annihilape on the lead, and yes, I'm running close combat on it. Before this run, I was going to say you should absolutely be running Shadow Ball, as I'm out of charge teams myself, which is why I'm using close combat. But hey, close combat did extremely well too, so I don't really have much to say on that. As for the other move, it's up to you. Ice Punch will be extremely helpful against opposing Mandy, Dragalge, and the occasional Venu, but the faster pacing to Night Slash has its merits as well. Jellicent on the safe swap to bait out that grass type, and in the back, the Pokemon brought back to its former glory, Swampert. And with that, let's get right into the battles. Alright, getting to the first battle, we lead Annihilape into Empoleon. Fantastic lead for us, you can see what my opponent wants to do. They're going to swap into a Trevenant, and now this is a very tough safe swap for us because we don't have an answer to the Trevenant. So we're going to load up to the potential Ice Punch and go for the Night Slash. The reason why we don't go for the Shadow Ball there is because we want to take advantage of that one turn desync my opponent has by swapping, and in doing so, and to be able to do so, we have to throw first. Plus, I don't have a Shadow Ball at all, so might as well just go for the Night Slash. I will commit a shield, go for my second Night Slash, get their shield, and then safe swap in Jellicent. I will have to give up my second shield here because the Shadow Ball will do massive damage. Now I'm going to go for 3 hexes for good timing, and then a Surf. You'll see after all this Night Slash chip, Hex chip, everything, the Trevenant is in a very manageable range. They are going to be able to reach another Shadow Ball to take us out on Force Switch advantage, but that's perfectly fine because they have an Empoleon on the lead, and both Annihilape and Swampert absolutely destroy the Empoleon. So in reality, I wasn't looking to maintain switch advantage there. Instead, I was looking to do a team effort to get rid of the Trevenant. Back in comes the Empoleon, and let me tell you what it's not expecting. A close combat that nearly one-shots it, and in the back they have a Shadow Machamp. You know, I wasn't quite sure if an Earthquake would KO from here, so I decided to play it safe instead and go for the double Hydro Cannon, but looking at that damage, one Earthquake definitely would have been enough, but either way, we're able to take that game. GG's to my opponent. And that's one thing that close combat Annihilape has helped out a lot with against to absolutely nuke those Greedents or Empoleons that, you know, might be expecting a Shadow Ball instead. Next battle, Great Lead into a Ferrothorn Lead. They safe swap into a Lantern, and this is exactly why we have the Swampert in the back here. The electric type safe swaps and everything else that's extremely weak to Swampert, threw Swampert on the back to punish those safe swaps, and it ended up doing just that and more in being a brilliant sweeper in this cup. The Lantern will just be able to hang on from that Earthquake, land another Surf. That is perfectly fine, as in comes the Ferrothorn, and the Ferrothorn's going to get a little bit of a Bullet Seed down, but we're going to get an Earthquake's worth of chip onto the Ferrothorn, or force that shield back, which either way is perfectly fine by me, because again, shields down mean there's a higher chance of Annihilape landing the close combat. You know, my opponent may shield that Earthquake going, hey, it's an Earthquake from a Swampert, it hits really hard, and Annihilape doesn't really have anything to threaten me, well, they would be wrong. Close combat coming through, able to land, goodbye Ferrothorn, and in the back they have a Shadow Poliwrath, and this game is just over at this point. I can go for my second close combat of the match, gets the final shield from the Poliwrath. Probably could have stayed in and landed another close combat, but we're going to show them the Jellicent to speed up the game, and my opponent concedes the match. GG's. Next battle, Tentacruel Lead. This is terrible for us since we don't have access to Shadow Ball, so we're going to instantly safe swap into our Jellicent, and they meet it with a Greedent. And so far, this just seems like a hard counter game, but we're going to play it out, see what we can do. Surf does land. Opponent's now going to go for Crunch number 1. Throw one more Hex and then a Surf for our second Surf. And unfortunately, my opponent did get the defense drop on the Crunch. And the defense drop in this matchup isn't terrible, just because it takes 3 moves for the Greedent to take you out. But instead of having to go for 3 crunches, if they get a defense drop on the first crunch, it allows them to go for 2 crunches and then a body slam. Plus also potentially threaten a farm down, which, you know, isn't great. But my opponent actually ends up letting that Surf go. And you know what? I see a potential opportunity to flip switch here, which since I'm not running Shadow Ball, I'm going to need to do. But in doing so, I'm going to have to double shield 2 moves, which feels absolutely terrible. My Jellicent survives on 1 HP. In comes Licky Licky. So now we get our Annihilape on the Licky Licky and Swampert on the Tentacruel, which is exactly where we want it. So I'm going to load up, go for this close combat. Again, close combat over Shadow Ball, really helpful here. Able to land, pick up the 1 shot on the Licky Licky. And however, we have the alignment we want, but my opponent up 2 shields. I still think they're going to be able to take this one as they get the attack drop as well. So I'm thinking, you know, my win condition here is to get 2 Hydro Cannon baits and land the Earthquake. But my opponent no shields the Hydro Cannon. And I guess at that point, kind of just a misplay on me, because my win condition from the start was just full sending the Earthquake, of which my opponent would have let me play to. But either way, we'll play to my opponent, as down goes Swampert, and down will go my Annihilape as well. In these battles, you've seen close combat Annihilape come in clutch so often, and it has. I really cannot say that it hasn't, because it's done extremely, extremely well. But there are also situations where, you know, you're up against an Annihilape Mirror or a Jellicent or opposing Jellicent of some sorts, and you're really wishing you had that Shadow Ball. So both have its merits, but on this team, it just happened to work really well. Speaking of Annihilape Lead, we see Annihilape Lead here. We don't have that Shadow Ball, so we gotta swap into our Jellicent. They meet it with an Ampharos, and unfortunately, you know, I'd want to see that Ampharos on my Swampert, but either way, we're able to bait it out, and the overfarm allowing me to get to a Surf, so I can force shield advantage, which is absolutely huge. Honestly, even if you are running Shadow Ball on your Annihilape, it may not be a bad idea to swap into your Jellicent from the start, just because when you bring your Annihilape back in, you can get a nice counter down. Here, I bring my Swampert in, just because I don't have Shadow Ball on my Annihilape, so that energy lead doesn't really matter if they bring in their own Annihilape, since it would just eat up all that energy. So I'm getting a Mud Shot down here with the Swampert, where its energy will be more useful. But if I counter down with, if I had Shadow Ball and I counter down with Annihilape there, now I have a big energy lead to either go against this Greedent or against their Annihilape to outpace the Shadow Ball. So like I said, it may not be a bad idea to swap on out there anyways. But now that we have our Swampert on this Greedent, we're going to start spamming out these Hydro Cannons. Hydro Cannon number 2 is going to land. And here we want to overfarm as much as possible. Want to leave with residual energy. Still not in a range where that Body Slam would knock out yet, so I'm going to overfarm, get to 2 Hydro Cannons. First one will take out the Greedent unless they give up the shield. They don't, they let it go. And the second one will land on the Annihilape. I'm assuming they're going to save that shield for my own Annihilape for the threat of a Shadow Ball, which they do. And now, we're in a very tough position here. They have Shadow Ball. we have Night Slash. We build up to the Shadow Ball to threaten it, but bait with the Night Slash, and it gets the shield. So that's step one. Step two is, do they full send or not? I call the bait. They bait with a Night Slash, and just like that, we are now going to be able to win this match with Annihilape that has a close combat against Annihilape that has a Shadow Ball, as they full send it right there, and they concede the match. GG's. Next battle, we lead Annihilape into Empoleon. I don't know where all these steel type leads came from, but my Annihilape has been absolutely loving it recently. Same game plan as last time on the Trevenant safe swap, fire off this Night Slash after 6 counters. Fire off my next Night Slash. My opponent actually ends up over farming and lets me get to this move first, which is very, very fortunate because now I can fire off that Night Slash, swap into my Jellicent, and I'll be able to get an extra Hex through just because they have to fire off another move against my Jellicent that they wouldn't have had to if they threw a move against the Annihilape. Feeling a little risky, I saw that they were at basically 100 energy, so I felt a C-Bomb bait was in store, and it was the correct call, so now we're going to be able to handle this Trevenant very, very nicely. As here, we're just going to let this go. Jellicent did its job, got the Trevenant in a very nice farm down range. I'm going to bring back my Annihilape to hopefully be able to counter down in time. I'm just not going to be able to, and you know what? Empoleon Lead, Trevenant's gone. I'm going to leave a 1-shield Swampert. Its opportunity to shine. Now they hard swap in Annihilape, and this match is winnable. Swampert's going to have to 1v3 this team. First Hydro Cannon does land. Going to load up on some energy. I will give up my final shield here to respect the Shadow Ball. But they bait with an Ice Punch, so now I'm going to have to overfarm just carefully enough before they get to their next Ice Punch. I don't want to take any extra damage I don't need to. But the Hydro Cannon is not enough to take it out, but we still get that Mud Shot down right before they get to the Shadow Ball. And Swampert is smelling blood in the water. In comes Empoleon, fire off this Earthquake right before they get to a Hydro Cannon. Despite the Earthquake nerf, this will be enough to one-shot the Empoleon, and with that residual energy, we outpace the Trevenant to a Hydro Cannon. So despite a very tough situation on Trevenant safe swap, Swampert up a shield was able to 1v3 that team for a good game. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, Annihilape into another Annihilape Lead. Again, we know the game plan, safe swap into our Jellicent, and they meet it with a Lantern. And this matchup is starting to go downhill really, really quickly. But the good news is, Jellicent can kind of threaten the Lantern, so they're kind of forced to give up a shield there, as Jellicent can make it to 2 Shadow Balls before the Sparks plus a Thunderbolt will KO it. Plus those 2 Shadow Balls do plus the Hex damage, do just about enough damage to take out the Lantern. So despite the Lantern being brought into my Jellicent as a counter swap, we are still able to get shield advantage from the situation, which is pretty good. Now we're going to bring back in our Annihilape, trying to go for the counter down, just not able to get there in time. So we're going to give up a shield to the Thunderbolt, then commit to the counter down. We leave with 100 energy, and they bring in a Tentacruel. I was hoping they would have brought something in, you know, like a Greedent, or because, you know, it's Annihilape, Ghost type on the lead, weak to counter in the back. I was hoping they would have brought something in to the Annihilape like a Greedent, so I could absolutely nuke it with those close combats, in which case I would have been able to flip the match just due to Swampert's pacing against their own Annihilape. But they have another counter resist in the Tentacruel. My Annihilape basically had nowhere to go, considering their Lantern was onto my Jellicent, and this is looking like a good game here. Get to fire off another Hydro Cannon, which will get another shield from my opponent. They're able to get the counter down, but from here, they're at the back-to-back moves. I can just let this go, as I don't have any win condition left. They go for an Ice Punch, but I know that I will not be able to survive enough to take out their remaining Pokemon, and my Annihilape goes down. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, another Steel Lead. Annihilape absolutely loving it. They safe swap into a Goodra, We don't have the best answer, so we're going to go for that close combat and dip strategy. They shield the close combat. We swap into our Jellicent here, and we'll shield their first move, whether it's the Draco Meteor or the Power Whip. And if they let the close combat go, then you can actually if they let the close combat go onto their Goodra, you can then save swap it into your Jellicent and let the Power Whip or Draco Meteor go and still take switch. So essentially in that situation, if your opponent shields a close combat, you shield their move on your Jellicent. They let it go, you let the move go on your Jellicent. I don't know where their Steel type lead, Goodra, Safe Swap, and Dragalge in the back team came from, which is what this one is. But my team absolutely feasts on it. So back in comes the Jellicent. Shadow Ball will land to take out the Sandslash, and in the back there is that Dragalge, and Swampert will be able to take this match. I have no need to really bait here. I will give up a shield to potential outrage, which it is, and since they full sent the outrage, I can just full send the earthquake myself, where my opponent's only win condition at this point is calling a Hydro Cannon. But they shield, so we're gonna be able to outpace this earthquake either way. We'll have my opponent Aqua Tail baited there. I probably would have had to bait back. I mean, even then, not necessarily, because we can land, get the shield from the earthquake, land the Hydro Cannon, and then close combat Annihilape still does quite a bit. But either way, we're comfortably able to take that one. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, Annihilape into Poliwrath. And my opponent is staying in. They must be really weak to the Annihilape in the back. Again, we're going to overfarm here. We're going to let them throw the move first, just because we don't want to debuff ourselves with the close combat first. They swap into a Greedent trying to catch a Shadow Ball. And hey, I'm Greedent. I'm not running Shadow Ball. I'm running close combat. Despite the Scald debuff, that still does massive damage. And we're able to play to the CMP tie with the second close combat to their crunch. And from here, my Annihilape is actually in a pretty good position to sweep this match. Gonna load up. Unfortunately, not able to get the counter down. Would have been pretty sweet if you're able to get the counter down. But we're gonna have to throw the Night Slash on the CMP tie to the crunch. They bring back in that Poliwrath. They're not gonna counter down, and another close combat is gonna land here. If my opponent is willing to give up their final shield, they are not. And they have a Ufisk in the back. So, Electric type again. Swampert able to come in and shut it down. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, what do you know? Another Steel type lead. Opponent gonna swap into that Goodra, and just like last time, most likely lead the Dragalge in the back. So, close combat and dip. This one, my opponent decides to shield as well. Both Goodras have been respecting the close combat, so props to my opponent there. And from here, like I said, they shield, we shield, they no shield, we'll no shield. And now we're gonna go for the Shadow Ball. If your opponent no shields the close combat, you bring in your Jellicent and you go to no shield their move, and it is the Draco, you can land your Shadow Ball, as your opponent will most likely no shield it. You can land your Shadow Ball and then Hex all the way down. They will reach another Aqua Tail, but Jellicent is extremely bulky, plus the Goodra's attack is extremely debuffed that you can survive that Aqua Tail, Hex all the way down, and leave with 100 energy to then fire off against that Empoleon when it comes back in. So down goes the Goodra, we bring the Empoleon deep into the red, I throw one more counter, then swap into my Swampert, expecting them to throw that super effective Drill Peck, but my opponent makes a fantastic read just in case I do catch the move, as they go for the Hydro Cannon, but in the back, again, it is that Dragalge, and Swampert sweep the match, so my opponent concedes. GG's. Next battle, another lead, another Steel type. Opponent swaps into that Dragonite. We're going to build up to 6 counters to threaten that Ice Punch, but go for the Night Slash bait. My opponent commits a shield to respect that Ice Punch, and now we're going to save swap into our Jellicent. And from here, it's a pretty straightforward way where we can keep alignment in this matchup. We can no shield the Dragon Claw. We will have to give up a shield to the second Dragon Claw here. And now we can just go for the Shadow Ball to force that final shield. which we're going to do right here. See, my opponent wants to give up the final shield, they do, but either way, we're in a good position as we can make it to this Shadow Ball where my opponent will not be able to Dragon Breath down in time. So instead, they're going to save their Dragonite for later and bring back in that Ferrothorn, where I can land for the Shadow Ball to stall the clock, bring back in my Annihilape, go for this close combat before they reach a move. Again, close combat helping out a lot here with all the steel types we've been seeing. Down goes Ferrothorn, back in comes the Dragonite, not going to be able to farm down, so we go for the Night Slash on the CMP tie against the Dragonite. And here, I'm just going to bring in my Swampert. Swampert outpaces the Dragonite, and my opponent is still switch locked into this matchup. So we can go for the Hydro Cannon right away to take out the Dragonite. And hopefully with a Dragonite lead, with a Ferrothorn lead, Dragonite save swap, they're weak to Swampert in the back, which they are. It is that Tentacruel. So we're going to load up, fire off this Earthquake. Earthquake will land. We're not in Scald range yet, so Swampert is able to hang on from the Scald, make it to a Hydro Cannon or farm down the Tentacruel, whichever one comes first, and they concede the match. GG's. I talked for a long time in the beginning praising Swampert's role in the current Ultra Premier meta, and I think the results show for itself. So if you're seeing a lot of steel types, ground types, fire types, poison types currently in this meta, Swampert's going to be your choice. As for Annihilape, you're facing a lot of opposing Annihilapes, probably go for that Shadow Ball, but you're seeing more of those steel types or Greedents, then close combat could do you justice. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate you. If you enjoyed it, please drop a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Love to hear what you have to say. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.